The story for Mortal Kombat 10 takes place a couple years after the events of Mortal Kombat 9 and spans across a period of about 22 years. In the beginning, the forces of the former Elder God Shinnok and the sorcerer Quan Chi attack Earthrealm in an attempt to corrupt the life force of Earth. However, thanks to the efforts of the Guardian Raiden and his allies, Shinnok is defeated and Earthrealm is safe. Jump 20 years later, and the next generation of Earthrealm protectors are in the middle of their training when they are suddenly dispatched to the realm of Outworld during the midst of a civil war between the former Empress Mileena and the current Emperor Kotal Khan. It is during this time that it is discovered that Mileena has gained possession of Quan Chi's amulet, which has the power to free Shinnok, to which Quan Chi plans to manipulate events in order to retrieve the amulet, and it is up to the defenders of Earthrealm, both new and old, to stop him. Although the story itself is fine on its own, I personally felt that it wasn't quite as strong and focused as it was in Mortal Kombat 9. For starters, there's such a heavy focus on the concept of family, and since a large portion of the characters are directly related, I feel that for a game like Mortal Kombat, building a story that spends so much time developing these family connections amongst these characters and then turns it around and allows these characters to completely mutilate each other feels a bit misplaced. The story also does not do a very good job at explaining the events over the past 20 years. When the game begins, you start off with a few of the original characters in the first chapter, and then you're suddenly jumped 20 years into the future, and all of a sudden all these new characters pop up out of nowhere. When you get a chance to play as these new characters, only a handful of them are given a single cutscene going on into events going into the character's past. What made the plot of Mortal Kombat 9 work so much was the fact that events were going in one direction and we got to see the events of the game from different perspectives. But in this game, character development is amongst each other and not as individuals. On a positive note, there were a good number of cameos of characters from past Mortal Kombat games, which does give me the hope that we will see them return as playable characters in future installments. But on its own, for me, it just doesn't quite live up to the scale and interest that Mortal Kombat 9 had set up. Mortal Kombat 10 plays very much like its previous installment, however there have been a few changes to the original combat gameplay style. For starters, every character has 3 variations of combat styles, so instead of having one character that simply has a long list of combos and special attacks to learn, the 3 variations allow you to experiment to determine which particular version of each character you prefer to play as, making it much easier to master your fighter. X-rays, environmental attacks, fatalities, and brutalities have all returned, making the essence of gameplay a much more strategic feeling when it comes to knowing exactly when is the best moment to use these extra combative elements. However, I do feel a little bit disappointed that the tag team mode was removed this time around, since it really did bring a completely new element of gameplay to the previous installment. A new gameplay mode that has been added although is Living Tower, which has 3 variations that change over different periods of time, which require you to perform specific tasks in combat to achieve victory. Classic gameplay modes have also returned, like Test Your Might and Test Your Luck, and accomplishing these individual modes will earn you combat coins. You can then take these coins that you earn in challenge modes to return to the crypt, which has been redesigned to allow you to walk around as if you were in a first-person RPG map grid, and it is here that you will use your coins to purchase new finishers and extra behind-the-scenes content, as well as alternate costumes. The online element has also been granted a few new extras this time around. When you first start up your game for the first time, you will be asked to join a faction. From that point on, everything you do in both single player and online will give you points towards your faction. After each week, if your faction is declared the victor, you'll be granted access to special content and finishing moves exclusive to only those in your faction. Connecting with the other players online has always been an enjoyable experience as long as you don't have lag. There are multiple different play modes like King of the Hill and Team Deathmatch, which can always keep the entertainment going. The matchmaking, however, can be a bit unbalancing, as I did find it a bit difficult and frustrating to find opponents that were on my skill level. However, I'm sure this is something that will be fixed over time with patches over the next coming weeks. This being the first installment for the current gen systems makes Mortal Kombat look better than it ever has been before. The graphics are simply outstanding, and the amount of detail going into not only the character designs, but the X-ray moves and brutal fatalities can make even some of the most old school fans feel a bit grossed out with the multiple ways you can brutalize your opponents. The frame rate never once dropped for me, allowing me to see everything on the screen clearly, no matter how fast-paced and chaotic the fights played out. Some of the character designs are very creative and unique, like Devora and Kotal Khan, showing just how much work the designers put into creating these characters and making them stand apart from others. However, some characters like Classic, Sonya Blade, and Tanya don't seem to have been worked on to the same degree, and I know that for a majority of the characters that belong to the Special Forces, their attire wouldn't be all that unique. I still feel that much more work could have been done to their character looks to make them seem more memorable. Now, in conclusion, there is no question in my mind that Mortal Kombat 10 is a worthy, solid successor to 2011's Mortal Kombat 9. However, in terms of story, I just felt that there were a lot of story elements that weren't really developed very well. It wasn't quite as focused. Some characters really didn't get much development. And I don't like the fact that I have to read a comic book series in order to really understand the backstory and understand the events that actually led up into the present storyline that we have here in this game. However, it's still enjoyable, it has its funny moments, and there certainly are some touching moments that I wasn't really expecting. And I did happen to enjoy a lot of the cameos of past characters, which, as I said before, I'm hoping to see in future installments. Now, in terms of gameplay, this is the bread and butter of the franchise. It's downright brutal, it's gritty, it's bloody, and it is beautiful to look at. I mean, it's why we've kept playing Mortal Kombat to this date. However, I'm still not a big fan of how they handled the variation system. I really would have liked to have had the ability to actually switch between the 3 different variations in the midst of combat, as this was a function that we did have in Mortal Kombat The Deadly Alliance trilogy. And I also don't like the fact that they took out Tag Team Match in Mortal Kombat 10, despite the fact that they worked so well in following Mortal Kombat 9. However, this is still a great installment, and if anyone loves Mortal Kombat, then you need to pick up this game, or heck, if you're a fighting fan of video games in general, you need to pick this game also too. Now, if I had to pick a rating for this game, I'm going to have to give Mortal Kombat 10 an 8 out of 10. Certainly a must-buy, and if you haven't gotten it already, what's wrong with you? Because, heck, there are some pretty brutal fatalities that, I don't know how the boys and girls at NetherRealm come up with these ideas, but I like to see footage of what fatalities didn't quite make it into the game. If you like this video game review, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to track me my future video game reviews. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and I'll see you next time.